Oklahoma Petroleum Council. For a number of years, until his recent retirement, Mr. Steiger served as the manager of civic affairs for city service. I made a horrible mistake. This was 30 years ago. I was a kind of a newcomer to Oklahoma, had been here a couple of years, and so John, a friend John, and his wife said, "Oh, come with us up to Bartlesville, and so want you to come up, and Mother will prepare chicken dinner for us." This was on a Sunday, and so we finally made it up to Bartlesville, and some 99 miles from Stillwater, and so I met John's mother, and I said, "John tells me you work with oil." She worked for some years as a secretary, and I said, "Yes." She says, "I do." And I said, "Well, I'm certain you find Phillips to be a very great employer." And she said, "Now watch out. All these years I've been with city service." Well, city service is a great major here in Oklahoma. Only I didn't know back 30 years ago, but I was soon set straight all about it. And this is the firm we're hearing about this evening, this first hour. Now, Mr. Steiger has served in many capacities in civic affairs. He's been on every committee imaginable. He presently is chairman of Green Country, one of Oklahoma's 6 tourism promotion countries up in north central, up in east central rather, Oklahoma. He has served on the Oklahoma Bicentennial Commission. Oh, I have a long list of things before me that I could go over, but needless to say, you want to hear him talk and not hear me recite his many civic contributions to Oklahoma. So it's a very great pleasure at this point to introduce Mr. John Steiger, who will tell us of city service, patriarch of the majors. We're delighted to have you here, Mr. Steiger. Welcome, John.
Let me say that we of city service are not unused to the question, are you with city service in Bartlesville? Because Phillips Petroleum Company was the larger of the companies in Bartlesville. They had their headquarters there. Bartlesville was the headquarters for the petroleum operations, with the New York headquarters and with the general headquarters in New York City. So we were used to this question, are you with city service? And we always had to correct them and say, well, no, we're with the other company. That's why I wanted the opportunity to make the title of my talk here, City Service Patriarch of Oklahoma's Major Oil Companies. By patriarch, we mean that company with the more years of service to the industry, and in which case there is no doubt about the accuracy of the statement regarding city services being the patriarch. City Service Company. I think it's wise in any history that we should try to give an idea of what the times were like in this historical period that we're talking about, because only when you know the tenor of the times, what was happening at the time, can you evaluate and relate the history of a company or a person or anything like this. So let's get a little bit of a sense of the times that we're talking about. And we're talking about the very early 1900s. The opportunities in the early 1900s for those who could see them, who had the vision to see them, were limitless. There was great inventions, a flourishing economy, mass production techniques. If you'll recall, Henry Ford was just getting that flivver into mass production about that time. there were these mass production techniques and a growing population that offered the nation a real new way of life. It was a new era, as you might say, and in this field of public utility services and energy supply, our nation was in transition. It was in a transition period here. What the nation now calls its energy business was transitioning from coal oil for the lamps and the coal age to the motor fuel age. And this was the transition period we were in. As we say, Henry Ford's mass production of the Tin Lizzie provided opportunity for services to a burgeoning mode of people transportation. Liquid fuel for the locomotives of America was only a glint at that time in the eyes of most visionaries. In the field of combustion, the new potential of widespread use of natural gas and liquid fuels beckoned development and merchandising. Not only must this be developed, but it must be sold. You don't develop something and expect there to be there waiting for you a market for it. So there must be merchandising involved. So we had a potential that centered in both in this area in both the household and industrial development. In the field of commercial illumination, the merchandising and selling power of illumination lay untouched and undeveloped. You walk into a shopping center, illumination, selling. You see the full colors. In promotion and in merchandising, illumination is very important. This was untouched and undeveloped at that time. And into this era of opportunity stepped several then unknown men, the visionaries which were to be set down in history as the century's great entrepreneurs. They were generally unschooled in the field or in the business, in the field of business management. They were hard-fisted, they were work-oriented, individualist, and they had expectations for both themselves and those who worked around them. And some of these people had great vision, grounded upon the almost unlimited potentials of the day. They turned opportunities that were there into actuality, and for this all for the benefit of their corporations, themselves, and also for the advancement of our nation. Now, into the beginning of our present century of opportunity, there stepped a 40-year-old fledgling whose formal education had stopped at the age of 12. But he had 28 years of self-taught engineering from, what do you think? Machinery catalogs. He studied them like as if they were textbooks. And he had the same number of years of hard work in the field of manufactured gas from coal, which we think today is one of the solutions to the energy problem. We can show you a picture back in, I would say, 1910, a gas manufacturing plant, big old stack of coal out there, and the city service emblem there, which shows that we were doing it way back in those days. Now, many of us think that manufactured gas from coal is, something new. It's something new. Well, this was the man. He was self-taught and 40 years of age. The immediate and the imminent opportunities lay in acquiring and merging and providing management services to the myriad of small, inefficiently run, and near bankrupt utility firms that dotted our nation. And out of this potential, Henry L. Doherty formed City Service Company in 1910. The merging of three of these utility companies made up City Service company. These were located in Colorado, Missouri, and Washington. And within a single year, that year being 1913, 53 utilities were acquired and consolidated into the City Service family of companies. Together with others, Doherty infused new life and glamour into the utility business. Then it had sort of a lackluster experience. City Service early field of endeavor was in the field of manufactured gas from coal and in the electrical service of electricity. We also engaged in interurban service and some of the other so-called cities services, and that's how come we are named Cities Service, because we serve cities, plural. So we have this situation. During the early years of City Service, the capital for the acquisition and operation of its empire of utilities was the challenge supreme. Wall Street in New York City was the mecca, the fountainhead of domestic capital supply, and there was intense competition for that capital. And in order to be where the capital lending action was, Henry L. Doherty built him two skyscrapers on Lower Manhattan. One he called 60 Wall Tower. The other had the mailing address of 60 Wall Street, which put him right in the center of Wall Street. And this was his way of getting close to the capital supply of that day. And I think as we look to Oklahoma City and Tulsa at the big banking institutions, I think we realize that New York City, Wall Street, is no longer the big capital supply of the nation, and that many large projects can be financed and we can provide the capital from local, as you might say, local lending institutions. Well, this was the situation. Getting capital was a job. And in a sort of an editorial comment, I would like to say that Henry L. Doherty probably was the most frustrated person imaginable, because he had the vision and he knew the potential of this age. But that money was hard to come by. The capital was hard to come by. And it was just awfully hard to get enough capital to finance the projects that he saw there as he looked way down the road into the potential of supplying services to cities at that time. And so I can see that fighting for that capital in the volumes equal to the opportunities of the day was really heartbreaking. It was a heartbreaking challenge and certainly most frustrating. And if he had ulcers, I think he deserved them. As a merchandiser of utilities, Doherty engineered the first, and I've got to say this real slow, exteriorly lighted building in the United States. In other words, here he was merchandising electricity. He had it to sell. And this was another avenue, a market outlet for electricity. So at Denver, there was a multi-storied building way back in the early, I'd say 1915 or 16, that was exteriorly lighted. Now, today that's commonplace. In fact, our new building in Tulsa was beautifully engineered for exterior lighting. But the energy situation came along, and so we had to cover up that exterior lighting. It was real unusual when they first turned on the lights. The story is told that the captain of a commercial airline coming into Tulsa was so impressed with it over a period of time that as he came into land, he would say, "Ladies and gentlemen," over the intercom system, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're approaching Tulsa, and this pillar of light that you see there is the Bank of Commerce building. Well, the Bank of Commerce occupies the first 2 floors of the building, and it was the city service building and not the Bank of Commerce. So we had to kind of straighten them out along that line. But the merchandising of electricity exterior lighting had a part in merchandising, and you've got to sell these products. Electricity was a selling job. And back in those days, it was a selling job. You had to merchandise it, just as you had to merchandise the use of natural gas for cooking. Now, that didn't just come. You had to merchandise it. You had to show them that they could cook on a gas-fueled kitchen range. Well, in addition to the building at Denver, Henry L. Doherty was responsible for lighting the Statue of Liberty. And I think there's no better testimony of the American enterprise system than the Statue of Liberty there, lighted up. So he was not only an engineer, but he was a merchandiser. He was a salesman, and a darn good one at that. In the field of liquid energy, Doherty engineered and was instrumental in the conversion of locomotives to oil, formerly coal. Since this is a seminar that is composed of Oklahomans interested in the impact of history on modern day events, let me make several general statements that will permit us to switch from our founder at 60 Waldhauer, New York headquarters to the equally interesting history of the major subsidiary that had its beginning in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, just 2 years after the parent company was founded. In making that switch, I think we should make proper recognition as to the influences of the company's founder that rippled out and radiated out to each of the 100 of the subsidiary companies held by City Service Company. This influence included pioneering business management approaches that included budgeting. And back in those early days of business, where there was no business management, budgeting was something that was so novel that I think no one really appreciated what budgeting meant in large company operations. Some of our old timers kind of begrudged that budgeting because it meant additional work, and once budgeted, then they expected you to get some earnings from that budget. And so there was responsibility there. But his influence in the field of business management rippled out to these subsidiaries. It included also the importance of research. Here was a self-taught engineer who was so imbued with the potential of research in coming up with solving problems and coming up with new products and new services that this rippled out throughout the organization. His influence in merchandising, fundamentals in merchandising, were rippled out to every one of those individual subsidiaries. The infusion of the founder's philosophy was just something that the average person doesn't realize until you go back into the history and see the influences of this founder. Well, now for the switch to the Oklahoma-based company that through the years from 1912 had been actually the true energy subsidiary of City Service Company, specializing in oil and gas exploration, oil and gas and fuel transportation and transmission, gas processing, refining and marketing. And sensing the advantages of natural gas over manufactured gas, some of the management, including those who were those management people who came into City Service Gas Company, they saw the potential of natural gas over manufactured gas, and were instrumental in buying some small producing properties, and also in stimulating present subsidiaries in their interest for exploration for more gas. Out of this search for new gas producing fields came, and this emphasis in the beginning was in the East Kansas area, an area in which the present City Service Gas Company, headquartered here in Oklahoma City, had its roots, and those roots extend back to, oh goodness, Harry, how far back did the gas company roots extend? Harry Ford, a City Service Gas Company. 1904? 5? Uh-huh. So this intensification of the exploration for natural gas sort of had its roots there in East Kansas, where a subsidiary of the gas company was very active as a transmission company and as a supplier of gas to municipalities. The roots of one of the other subsidiaries goes back to the 1800s, and the Foster lease which included the whole Osage Indian Nation. So managed and operated out of the Bartlesville City Service. Bartlesville was the City Service Gas Company, and they were responsible for this emphasis on natural gas versus manufactured gas. Heading the Bartlesville operations, then it was called the Empire Companies, because for just about every operation there was a company named for it, because this was individual financing, and you financed an operation, not a total company. So that's how come the name Empire Companies. The first, shall we say, general manager of the Empire Companies in Bartlesville was H.R. Strait, and he had quite a history in the petroleum industry. He'd worked in the Pennsylvania oil fields at Tidioute since he was a teenager, and within the policy influence of Doherty, Strait hired Charles N. Gould, and I think you know Charles N. Gould, the covered wagon geologist, the founder of OU School of Petroleum Geology, and apparently one of the pioneering petroleum geologists in the world. And we hired him to do some geological work in East Kansas, looking for gas to supply the transmission companies right there in the Wichita area or East Kansas area. The main objective here again was to find new gas reserves, because many of the utilities at that time were grounded upon the gas production from one well. And you know, gas reserves deplete pretty fast sometimes. So the objective was to find new gas reserves. Gould was impressed with the anticline theory for the accumulation of oil and gas. And he thought, here the oil and gas travels down these rocks, permeable rocks. It comes to a pimple in the earth, and the forces push it up into this pimple, and you have places where the oil and gas are accumulated. I hope we don't have any geologists. I hope all the geologists are at the regular meeting out here. That's a layman's approach to geology, and I'm not one of them. But Charlie Gould was impressed that this was where he'd find oil and gas. He did some preliminary work, and then he suggested that we hire a man by the name of Everett Carpenter, who incidentally was a second cousin or something like that of Charlie Gould's. He had just graduated from college with a degree in rock geology. There were no petroleum geologists back in those days. They were mining geologists. They were geologists pitched at mining hard ore. Everett Carpenter came out together with some of the city service people. He surveyed the East Kansas area. They found the El Dorado anticline. They mapped it, suggested that wells be drilled there, and in addition to the Augusta field, which was discovered a few short months before El Dorado, and after unsuccessful drilling by the city of El Dorado on that El Dorado anticline, city service, Harry may say it was Wichita Natural Gas Company, but a city service subsidiary, discovered the El Dorado field. And it's interesting to note that the El Dorado field put Kansas on the oil map. It has been documented that the El Dorado field during World War I provided 1/2 of the increase in oil production that permitted the Allies to float to victory on a sea of oil. And that quote is by Lord Curzon of England. That has been documented. El Dorado today, over the years, El Dorado supplied fighting fuel for 3 wars, World War I, II, and the other war, which some dispute wasn't a war after all. But nonetheless, it has, through those years, provided oil and has contributed mightily to the economy of eastern Kansas and also to the culture and progress of communities. Right up there in El Dorado today, there is an effort, a government, city service government effort to wring a third crop of oil from those rocks by way of a micellar Palmer technique, a new research technique. Well, out of this pioneering geological search for oil, for gas that resulted in discovering oil, came these 2 discoveries, and several of the developments were to revolutionize the oil industry. And here are some of the areas in which there were important contributions to the oil industry. With the phenomenal success of the East Kansas discoveries, the city service geological staff was increased so that it could make what has been the first wide-scale geological survey in the world. This was the first wide-scale survey in the world in the field of petroleum exploration. The geological mapping of the El Dorado field was so accurate that there were few unproductive acres within the defined area, and there were virtually no unproductive acres outside of that defined area. This oil finding success raised the stature of rock geologists to oil finders. It actually established the new profession of petroleum geologist as versus your mining or hard rock geologist. And it's interesting in studying some of the other oil industry histories, they quote some of their top management people quite a few years after El Dorado, Bill Payne, and they said, we're not going to have any of this geological stuff. We're going to drill them where we think the oil is. And of course, some of those folks who made those statements have had to eat their words. So the El Dorado field actually established as a profession petroleum geologist. So coming out of the schools of geology, universities were these rock geologists. City Service saw that we had to convert these rock geologists to petroleum geologists. So it established the first in-house petroleum geological school in the industry and in the nation. And they converted the hard rock geologist into petroleum geologists. And by the beginning of World War I, City Service had 200 or 250 petroleum geologists. Most of the work at that particular time was surface geology. And incidentally, at the beginning of World War II, the number of our City Service petroleum geologists was diminished by the war, and we hired the first woman geologist. Now then, let's you women, there's your woman's lib way back in World War I days, the first woman geologist in the industry. At El Dorado also was established the first secondary recovery project by injecting air and gas back into the formation as a sort of a propulsion type action. Also with the electric background in electric utility services, it was just natural that way back in those early days of El Dorado that electricity would be used to drill wells and to produce them too. And of course this was the forerunner of our present automated oil field operations, where there are very few people in an oil field and it's all done automatically. As problems in the El Dorado field developed, the company saw the need for petroleum-oriented engineers. Here again, your engineer was a civil engineer or some other type of engineer. But the schools weren't turning out petroleum engineers, reservoir engineers, or petroleum type of engineers. So we needed them. Here was a founder who believed in research. Here was a founder who was self-made engineer, and we needed petroleum-oriented engineers. So the company took these general engineering graduates from the colleges, and in 1 and 2 year program, which they call junior engineers, trained them into petroleum engineers and reservoir engineers and secondary recovery engineers. And out of those graduates, and we were training hundreds of them, and many of the independents and many of the majors grabbed on to some of our junior engineers after they had gone through the school and after they'd had a few years of experience. And some of our foremost engineers in the industry, if you look down at their resumes, there's something that says they were a member of the City Service Junior Engineer Training School. So we through that area, in that field, we have supplied many engineers. At El Dorado, your petroleum-oriented engineers developed the forerunner of modern-day detergents. This was before World War I. Now, when did modern-day detergents come into being? I don't know, but it was a good number of years after that. Now, these were used in down-the-hole treatment of oil wells. In Joe Williams' historical on Bartlesville, which is just out, and Paul says he just received a copy of it yesterday or today, Joe Williams describes City Service of Bartlesville initiated activities as the forerunner of petroleum research. Now, it's interesting. What was petroleum research way back in the early 1900s? Well, in Bartlesville, this forerunner of petroleum research of City Service included 2 tin buildings, an experimental drilling derrick, and a tower. And I think you can, and the research approaches, the equipment were just about as primitive as anything. They were almost baling wire type of operations. But out of that primitive research, came some developments that were very definitely industry. They shaped the industry, the petroleum industry, and had a great influence on conservation. As we said, in the beginning, the use of natural gas and liquid fuels beckoned development and merchandising in those early 1900s, and that potential was researched at Bartlesville. Combustion engineering research, and combustion was a new thing. There was little known about the combustibility of fuels. They did very basic research into combustion, metering of natural gas, and other developments open the door to more efficient household and commercial utilization of natural gas. And here again, once the potential was developed for use, once the combustion research was there and the mechanisms developed for its use, Henry L. Doherty had the merchandising way to merchandise that. Tea kettle refining was the mode that day, and at this little primitive tower there, much research was done in thermal cracking, which at that early date was almost unheard of. Dust in the gas transmission lines that clogged up the burner tips was a problem, and surprisingly, out of the research to solve that dust in the gas transmission lines came a process for making petrochemicals. And the air oxidation process was incorporated into a plant near Talent, Oklahoma, and that plant has been called the patriarch of petrochemical plants in the Southwest. And that process it's cheap, low pressure, and a very wonderful process, and it's still being used by another company under royalty payment. Incidentally, at that plant was manufactured formaldehyde, which is an embalming fluid, and I don't think this was attributed to Henry L. Doherty, but some of the people said that they had never received a complaint from any users of our formaldehyde. So that was a testimonial that was unsolicited. Probably the most significant research that came out of the Bartlesville Research Center, primitive as it was that development that undergirded and proved Henry L. Doherty's theory on unitization of oil fields. Here's what they did. They took oil cores, sand cores, that were impregnated with oil. They simulated underground reservoir conditions, and out of that came the conclusion, very definitely, that gas dissolved in oil